Welcome back to UPsy. I'm Lachlan Reed here with Simon Carver, and today we're poking at a question that can make your brain feel like it's dropped a spanner in the gearbox. Is personality basically fixed, or can it actually change?
It's such a good question because most of us talk about personality like the weather in a town. Oh, I'm anxious. He's just introverted. She's always been driven. We use those descriptions as if they're permanent landmarks. But in psychology, traits are usually understood as relatively stable patterns, not destiny carved into stone.
Yeah, relative is the key bit there. Stable doesn't mean frozen solid. It means if you're pretty conscientious today, chances are you'll still have some of that pattern next year. But that's not the same as saying, bad luck, mate, this is your final form. People shift, sometimes slowly, sometimes after a proper life whack.
Right. The research, broadly speaking, points in two directions at once. On one hand, personality traits do show consistency over time. That's why they're useful. They help explain why someone tends to react in familiar ways across situations. On the other hand, traits can and do move. Therapy can matter. Sustained effort can matter. Big life events can matter. New responsibilities can matter. None of that means instant reinvention, but it does mean change is possible.
I like thinking of traits less like tattoos and more like tracks through a paddock. If you walk the same path every day, it gets worn in, easy to follow, feels natural. But if you start taking a different route, over and over, eventually the old track grows over a bit and the new one becomes the default. That's a terrible bush analogy, but you get me.
No, it works, because when people hear transformation, they often imagine some dramatic movie montage. New haircut, new journal, entirely new self by Thursday. But most psychological transformation is much less glamorous. It's a gradual shift in habits, interpretations, and emotional responses. The outer label may stay similar for a while, even while the inner process is changing.
Exactly. Say someone thinks, I'm just a defensive person. What might actually be happening is more specific. They've built a fast habit of reading feedback as attack, feeling a jolt of shame, then snapping back to protect themselves. If they learn to pause, read the moment differently, and respond with a bit less heat, they haven't become a totally different species, but their personality pattern has shifted.
And that matters existentially as well as clinically, because we often confuse who we are with the patterns we've repeated. We mistake familiarity for identity. We say, this is me, when sometimes we mean, this is the version of me I've practiced the most.
Oof. Yeah. The greatest obstacle can be the person we think we already are. Not because that person is fake, exactly, but because they're incomplete. A mask can be useful. It helps you get through school, family stress, work, heartbreak. But if you forget it's a mask, you start serving it instead of wearing it.
So maybe the cleanest way to frame chapter 1 is this. Personality is real. Patterns are real. Stability is real. And change is real too. Transformation doesn't usually mean deleting yourself. It means reshaping the patterns that once helped you survive so they can better fit the life you're actually living now. And if change is possible, the next question is, why does it feel so threatening? Why does growth, which sounds lovely in theory, often feel awful in practice?
Because the brain's a funny beast. It loves a familiar loop, even when the loop's a bit rubbish. There's a kind of psychological homeostasis there, yeah? A pull back toward what's known. If you've spent years being the pleaser, the achiever, the invisible one, the angry one, whatever it is, that pattern becomes your home turf.
Exactly. Homeostasis is a great word for this. Systems try to maintain continuity, and psychologically, our defenses often protect that continuity. Defense mechanisms aren't always villains. Many of them began as intelligent adaptations. A child learns to stay hyper-alert in a chaotic home, or to hide neediness because need was met with rejection, or to become funny, competent, agreeable, anything that keeps connection intact.
Then later, as an adult, that old protective move can keep firing when it's not needed. Bit like an old trail bike throttle sticking open after the track's already flattened out. Useful once, dangerous later. But here's the kicker. If you try to change it, your whole system can go, "Oi, what are you doing? This kept us safe."
Yes, that's why insight alone often isn't enough. You can know, intellectually, I don't need to people please all the time, and still feel panic when you say no. The panic doesn't necessarily mean the new behavior is wrong. It may mean the old identity is being challenged.
And that's where self-awareness comes in. Not the flashy, "I've read 3 books and now I diagnose my uncle at barbecues" kind. I mean proper self-observation. Becoming a witness to your own patterns. Noticing the trigger, the story, the body reaction, the role you slip into before it all goes automatic.
That witnessing stance is huge. You start to catch the sequence. When someone goes quiet, I assume they're angry. When I feel criticized, I turn cold. When I'm unsure of myself, I become the helper so I won't be excluded. Once you can see the pattern, even dimly, you've created a little space between stimulus and response.
That space is gold. Tiny, but gold. Because before that, it feels like this is just who I am. After that, it becomes, this is the move I do. Different thing entirely.
And we should say plainly, discomfort during growth is not proof of failure. Sometimes it's evidence of reorganization. If you've always equated disagreement with abandonment, then learning to stay present in conflict will probably feel shaky. If you've always armored yourself with perfectionism, doing something imperfect on purpose may feel almost physically wrong.
Yeah, like your inner alarm system starts carrying on like a galah in a tin shed. Loud, dramatic, not always accurate. That doesn't mean every uncomfortable thing is good for you, obviously. But some discomfort is the cost of updating an identity that's gone out of date.
Beautifully put. Growth can feel like losing yourself when, in fact, you may be loosening your grip on a narrower version of yourself. That's unsettling. It can feel lonely. It can bring anxiety. But those experiences may be part of moving from reflex to choice.
So if change feels threatening, maybe don't read that as a stop sign straight away. Sometimes it's just the old self defending the old map, even though the territory has changed. All right, so if we can notice the pattern and survive the wobble, what next? This bit matters heaps. Transformation isn't about bullying yourself into becoming better. It's not kill off the weak parts, become a machine. That usually backfires.
Yes, integration is a much healthier frame than self-rejection. The goal isn't to eliminate parts of yourself, but to understand them and place them in a more mature relationship with the whole personality. The defensive, frightened, needy, angry parts usually carry a history. They're not random defects. They're strategies with a backstory.
So if a part of you gets jealous, shuts down, clings, explodes, avoids, the move isn't to call yourself pathetic and swing a hammer at it. The move is more like, what is this trying to protect? What threat does it think is here? Even saying that out loud can lower the temperature a notch.
And then, change becomes practical. Small repeated actions matter because personality is expressed through repeated behavior. If you want to become a little less avoidant, maybe the action is replying to one difficult message the same day instead of 3 days later. If you want to become more emotionally steady, maybe it's naming your feeling before acting on it. If you want to become more open, maybe it's telling one trusted person something true before you've polished it into a performance.
Or if you tend to be harsh with yourself, the practice might be catching the old inner spray and swapping it for something more honest and less brutal. Not cheesy affirmations if that makes you cringe, just something like, I'm spun up right now, and I don't need to make it worse. Simple. Repeatable. Like adjusting the chain a click at a time, not rebuilding the whole bike in one arvo.
Therapy can support this. So can meaningful relationships. So can major life transitions. But even outside formal settings, repeated practice changes the odds of how you'll respond next time. Over time, those moments accumulate into trait change. Maybe not in a dramatic before and after way, but in a genuine, lived way.
And I reckon that's the real heart of it. Authenticity isn't just blurting whatever you feel and calling it truth. Sometimes authenticity is earned. It comes from meeting the parts of yourself you'd rather not see, understanding how they formed, and building a self that can hold them without being run by them.
That creates coherence. You're less fragmented, less trapped between the person you perform and the person you privately fear you are, more able to respond from choice, values, and reality, rather than from old scripts alone.
So the mask doesn't have to be ripped off in one dramatic flourish. You just start noticing who's behind it. Then, slowly, the outside and the inside stop being such strangers. That's transformation, I think. Not becoming someone else, but becoming more fully accountable for who you can be.
That feels like a good place to leave it. Personality may be stable, but it isn't a prison. Change is possible, often uncomfortable, and usually gradual. And the aim isn't self-erasure, it's integration.
Beautiful. Thanks for puzzling through it with me, Simon. And thanks for listening, everyone. We'll keep exploring these messy human corners of the mind next time. Catch you later.
Take care, Lachlan. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.